Chapter 13. Dong Jin Ji. Roberta led the North Korean soldiers into the city council chambers where the heads of her department sat nervously awaiting their arrival. Clarity was there, despite being fired. No one quite knew how to take the Green Berets, who were abrasive and in your face in the opinion of most of Petaluma's city officials, so for the moment, Clarity remained chief of police. Dong Jin Ji stopped just inside the room as his men positioned themselves tactically around the chambers. He regarded the people seated around a table at floor level, then cast his gaze to the 8 elevated seats where the city council members would have sat in a meeting. Ji was pleased these people hadn't taken the elevated positions. It would have denoted a sense of superiority, and quite frankly, the men and women of Petaluma were no longer superior to anyone. They were dying of disease and lack of proper medical care and would soon drop from more other preventable things like thirst, starvation, and even lead poisoning if any decided Ji was not welcome. The Korean wartime doctrine had changed little since the Korean War during the 1950s. They shared little in the way of theoretical tactical initiatives and practiced wartime strategies aimed at thwarting the Americans. Ji would make a very direct and to-the-point offer with these people, and if they balked, he would impose force. Ji fully expected to shoot one of Petaluma's city officials during his first meeting, but hoped it wouldn't come to that. Americans were soft, and in Ji's opinion, would seek the easiest option for survival. To go against North Korea, backed by China, and fight for survival against thirst, starvation, and illness was akin to fighting a war on 2 fronts. The average men and women of America weren't prepared to fight a single front war, much less one against 2 menacing forces. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen," Ji greeted the group with his flawless English. "I am Dong Jin Ji, and as I am sure your city manager has explained, North Korea and China have reached out to what is left of Washington, D.C. to offer humanitarian aid, but have been rebuffed." "What do you mean, what's left?" Dan from the Public Works Department asked. His face creased with concern. Ji forced a smile as his icy stare locked on Dan. "I mean, your country has suffered a great blow, and my people are prepared to render aid in the way of food, medical supplies, and equipment needed to repair your infrastructure." Clarity raised a hand. "Aid in exchange for what?" Holding the plastic smile, Ji switched his gaze from Dan to Clarity. "Are you negotiating on behalf of the U.S. government or just the city?" he asked, as if wanting clarification before moving on. Randall Clarity's face turned a shade of red. "I'm asking for the city of Petaluma and as a concerned citizen," he sputtered, his voice reflecting how unnerved he felt at the sight of North Korean soldiers on American soil. Ji's smile faded slightly as he examined Randall Clarity. "And what duties do you perform here?" he asked, having studied the city's managerial structure ad nauseum and already knowing the answer. "I'm the chief of police," Clarity fired back, sitting up straighter. He immediately regretted his admission when he saw the malevolent micro-expression that flashed across Ji's face for just an instant before it was replaced by a placid, unreadable countenance. Ji found himself at a crossroads with Clarity in particular. He might be able to use the arrogant police officer to secure passage for the impending occupation of California. The man would either be a thorn or a force multiplier, but before he could use him, he would be required to assess which. If the officer decided to be a thorn, Ji would ensure that choice was short-lived, quite literally. He rubbed his palms together as if cooking up a great plan. "We need one another. I need you to police the people in the area. Let them know we are not here for any other reason than to set up a supply chain from Portland, Oregon to Mexico. My aid workers cannot do their jobs if they are harassed along the route. You can stop any such interference, Chief Clarity," he said, adding in Randall's title and name for effect. Roberta interjected herself into the conversation before Clarity lost any more ground with the Korean man. "Mr. Ji, I think what our police chief is asking is when can we see supplies in the way of food and other essentials. The city is dangerously low, and although we've secured several of our grocery stores, Many were not, and have been looted. The ones that are under our control, well, much of what's inside have an expiration date. Most perishables are gone by now, and people are being given cereal and crackers, things that don't spoil. I must establish the supply line before my country will risk sending any humanitarian workers into the country. Roberta recoiled slightly. From Portland, Oregon to Mexico? Before you offer real aid? G's chin lowered as he ran a hand down the side of his face. That is correct, Roberta Maddox. Roberta looked taken aback by the mention of her full name. Well, how long? I mean, what's our timeline? When do we see this humanitarian aid? She stammered, sounding a little less in charge. Before G could reply, Roberta threw out another question. Why isn't the UN involved in this? G waved a hand dismissively. The UN would take weeks to put people in America. We work much faster. G gave a quick hand signal to his men in the room, and they began to move toward the exits. This meeting is through. Mr. Policeman, can you come with us? The offer wasn't exactly an offer, and Clarity read it properly. Come with us, or be brought. Outside, G walked ahead of Clarity, but slowed so the officer could catch up. Randall, is it? When Clarity nodded, G went on. How many policemen do you have? Well, I don't know for sure. A lot of them left. Just went home and never came back. How many? G snapped, his voice clipped and impatient. Maybe 5? Find your lost officers and have them secure all the overpasses within the city limits. You have 1 day to complete this. G's order was devoid of his usual carrot, promising aid in exchange for the community's cooperation, and that fact was not lost on Clarity. What are we securing them from? Clarity asked. When my people pass through here in a few days, I do not want any dissenters among you taking shots at them from the overpass. If this happens, we will respond accordingly, and I will hold you personally responsible for any loss of life. Clarity was stunned. Loss of life? Yes, Randall, loss of life. If I am to help you, it cannot be done at the expense of my men's lives. But you can't shoot people. We have laws, Clarity sputtered, looking confused and scared. Suddenly, he felt as though he was being outplayed badly. Mr. Clarity, if I'm to do my job here, there may be some troubles we must overcome for the greater good of your community. What is your saying here in America? I think it is, you have to break some eggs to make an omelet. Isn't that it? Clarity swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing, and G saw the comprehension regarding his analogy clearly in the man's face. He gave Clarity an icy smile and waved him away. Now go and find your lost policemen. G knew his sector had less than 48 hours before the launch of the invasion into the port of Portland, Oregon. Once that happened, if G was unable to enlist the help of local law enforcement, he and his men would be forced to secure safe passage. He wasn't all that worried about the infantry transport armor that would be passing through the area. The Americans, although armed at the individual level like nothing seen anywhere else in the world, weren't allowed weapons able to do much damage to the Chinese-made ZBL-09 Snow Leopard APC or other armored personnel carriers. The ZBL-09 was an 8-wheeled vehicle developed by Norenco, a Chinese company that designed and built everything from vehicles and guns to oil rig equipment. Operated by a crew of 3, it could carry 7 to 10 troops depending on their loadout. Its main gun came in the form of a 30mm cannon and was complemented by a single 7.62mm machine gun. The Snow Leopard boasted a top speed of 60 miles per hour, but was hamstrung by a relatively short range of just under 250 miles. G knew the importance of controlling the supply line, especially considering their vehicle's limited range. The minimum number of refueling stations would be 6, but the invasion planners erred on the side of caution and implemented 8 in total. The static refueling points would be the most vulnerable to attack, and G made no mistake when he told himself there would be no shortage of intense fighting to seize and hold their route south. A war model done by men much more in tune with the Western culture pontificated the American public would, for the most part, cooperate if brought to their knees first. Almost as a caveat, those same smart war planners had warned of a small percentage of Americans who would retain that fighting spirit they were so well known for. In G's estimation, if even 1% of California's population resisted, he'd be facing roughly 40,000 men and women trying to kill him and his men. Although he doubted they'd be well organized, the fact remained that the number was equivalent to some small divisions and was not something to take for granted. He predicted the convoy would push south past the Bay Area and down through California with little resistance. His worry was getting through Oregon and Northern California, where G suspected the 1% may give them some trouble. Oregon and Northern California were not G's jurisdiction, and for that, he was thankful. His comrades assigned to the North were sure to earn their medal before they reached the Bay Area. G's thoughts were interrupted as Roberta exited the city building, hurrying towards him. "Mr. G," she called out, waving a hand in the air as he turned her way. Upon reaching him, she stood as straight as her small frame would allow. "How do we contact you?" G's naturally suspicious mind churned. "Why would you need to know this?" "I'm trying to keep all lines of communication open here." "I will be in contact with you and your people very soon. Until then, it is better if you don't know our whereabouts. I would not want anyone trying anything foolish." The pleasant look evaporated from her face. "No one's going to do anything to you and your men, Mr. G." G studied the woman for a moment, then gave her a forced smile, turned, and left her standing awkwardly in front of her city's building. As G walked away from the woman, he reached down and flipped his tactical radio on. He turned it off while addressing the Americans, knowing his men were monitoring their own radios and would have let him know if anything was amiss. The first thing G heard was repeated calls trying to raise his 2 men at the boats. He knew they had arranged check-in times with the men inside the town, and he also knew the reliability of radio communications and how bad they could be. It wasn't any of those things that piqued G's interest. It was the tone of the voice calling his boatmen. At the next break in the radio traffic, G cut in. "Dragon Actual, what is the problem?" "Dragons 11 and 12 have not checked in and are not responding to our calls." G's brows knitted, nearly touching in the center of his forehead. "Alternate channels." "Done!" "Move the quick reaction team out to the boats, now," G barked in Korean, his tone reflecting the stress suddenly heaped on him. The Koreans' radios chirped and chattered as men were ordered into place. Soon, 6 highly trained North Korean Special Forces men were running along a pre-planned route back to where they'd staged their boats. While the QRF team hustled out to the boats, G and the rest of his men moved to a secure location inside a business on the edge of town. They'd move from building to building during their stay, never occupying the same place for more than 12 hours before relocating. An hour and 15 minutes later, G received the news that his 2 boats were destroyed and his 2 men were missing. The KPA men at the scene reported seeing parts of their comrades' uniforms floating in the slough, but found no other sign of their lost soldiers.